level of investment. So these are really very positive occurrences that are happening here. We've got some very strong active transportation support and trail systems and transit. All of these data points we think about. You've got a broad manufacturing base, as I mentioned, with larger numbers of growing smaller businesses with higher wages. So data was a foundational part of the report. It helped to inform a lot of our thinking, and there's more detail in terms of if you'd like to get into that. We like to do these infographics much more than just throw up large Excel spreadsheets with boring charts and such, but there is some of that in the report too, so if you like that, you can dive into that in the online version. So there, excuse me, oh thanks, oh boy, too much follow-up. As Sherry pointed out, there was a large survey effort here across the community. And I think what we heard really echoed what we saw as the strengths and the challenges going forward for Lebanon. So the plan documents all of this, and I know this is a bit of an eye chart, but again, we'll encourage you all to download the report once it's available. And you can dig into each of these various assets and challenges that have been identified by the stakeholder input. And then finally, you really look at the key strengths, right? So when we've been to a lot of communities, we always ask them, what is that value proposition? What is that very unique thing that distinguishes you from all others? Sometimes it's a singular asset. It's a high-profile natural resource, or it's a driver industry anchor. And sometimes it's a series of things that come together to sort of make that value proposition clear. And here in Lebanon, we think that there's many different points that come together, and I think it's very much reflected again in this room. I'm going to try to pull that page up real quick. My eyes are starting to do as well. One point is collaboration, right? So you've got lots of different stakeholders, lots of folks coming together, and it's very active. It's not just window dressing. You do things here. And that was evident in the study process. You're going to hear me say a lot later about the active lifestyle and your support for cycling and trail systems. Tourism as an economic development driver is a very critical thing. A lot of times that gets discounted. You know, oh well, tourism is sort of the second or stepchild, you know, of the economic development equation, and that is not the case. Tourism is an extremely important asset, and those visitors can become investors and residents in the long run. And here in Lebanon, we've got some high-value trail systems and beautiful land and agricultural areas in which people can visit and take advantage of. It's happening already, so how do you leverage that and understand it and make it work for you? Higher education and workforce development. It's clear in these facilities here at Lebanon Valley College and at HAC and other workforce systems that are in place that there's a very strong focus on higher education, workforce training, and industry training. Absolutely critical. You have an advantage here as well as you're part of a larger market. You're sharing a labor shed and an economic shed to be both a bedroom community and an employment destination. You've got to take advantage of that and understand where that connectivity is, and I think a lot of that understanding is already in place. And a very strong urban core. And last night I mentioned this to the group. I said sometimes when you're local and you've been here every day, you see more of the weaknesses as opposed to the positives because you become very critical about where those weaknesses are. When we came to Lebanon for the first time, we saw a very vibrant downtown. Yes, there were some vacant storefronts, but generally, I can tell you, there's some communities we go into and we're like, I don't know if we're going to be able to help. That is not the case here. This is a tweak. These are ideas that we really think can close some very small gaps and really accelerate the investment, especially in the central business district. You're going to hear some ideas around that as well. So a matrix of assets in which the plan is designed to leverage. So a quick about the structure of the plan itself. you'll see, and again, I'm going to spend just a few minutes highlighting each of the 8 priorities, but we've structured the plan this way. We have priorities. We have a definition of what the city's role is relative to that priority. And the way we define it is as either a champion, a catalyst, or a convener. And we think this is important because, again, even though this is a city-led plan, the city's not going to be able to do it on its own, and the mayor's not going to be able to do this on her own and with her staff. So this is really going to require a lot of different folks to come together and make it happen. So in some cases, yep, the city's going to be the champion and the lead agent to see that through. Other times, they're going to serve more as a catalyst. They're going to say, hey, this is a spark, right? We need to go ahead and intervene and create something of a structure to move things forward. And other times, things may already be happening, but they just need to be convened, and the city can play a role as convener. And then finally, we're going to identify key partners with each priority in the actions and the timeline and the metrics. So all of that standard rigor is there, and we tried to bring some ideas from national best practices in terms of how to measure those performance measures, both from a leading and a lagging indicator for each of the priorities. So there are 8 priorities here. And Rich, I'm going to grab this. There are 8 broad priorities. Let's see, where are they? Here they are. They focus on the central business district, safety and awareness, increasing housing options, closing the talent gap, small business development, marketing and engagement, cycling and tourism, and we were tasked with identifying some targeted investment zones as part of this plan. So I'm going to dive into each of those here in the next few slides. First up, central business district. This is really the central point for the city itself. And also, you know, so goes the city, so goes the county, so goes the region, because we really believe that, you know, anytime you have a city, especially its namesake for the county as a whole, you really have to make sure that that investment is happening there. And a lot of times that is in the central business district. So in this case, the city is seen as the champion in this process. The actions that are identified in the plan are as follows. Forming a business improvement district. Concurrent to this project, we had worked with Dave Fian, who's a consultant, sub-consultant to us, and he conducted a special process of feasibility study on forming a central business district improvement district. And the findings said that yes, it's absolutely feasible, there's support for it, you need to move that forward. So we carried that recommendation up into this strategic plan to feed back to that effort. And the plan outlines what those steps are, and I believe some of those ideas are already moving forward. Marketing and promotion, there's a discussion and actions around just how do you make sure that you brand the effort, you understand sort of where the destination attractions are and how to define those. So there's a process there that could be carried out by the business improvement district once it's formed. There's a major opportunity, we think, in the consideration, and some discussions have already taken place in relocating the city offices to the central business district. This is something that we feel should really happen, and we've seen too often where city services, you know, have been moved out of the central business district or just to the fringe, and for reasons such as parking or convenience or some cost issues. But you really lose a central bud of employment opportunities and activity that can really feed private investment. So the plan really encourages that idea continue to advance and mature. Again, destination themes, building around the marketing and promotion with your central business district and what your city is and what it can be going forward. So there's action items related to that as well. Engaging developers. This process is already underway. I mean, concurrently, this is one of those areas that as it was identified, the mayor immediately challenged us and said, can you put me in touch with some developers? Can you put me in touch with some folks that could potentially help with some market analysis in terms of how things could happen and what kinds of development could occur within our city? And absolutely we did. So we began some dialogue, and I think there's some activities that are going to result from that as well. And then finally, we don't want to just think of parking as a utility type of throwaway opportunity. It is an economic development tool. The way you incorporate parking, the way you develop a structure, and there's a growing literature and knowledge base out there on just how to do that. So this plan highlights a few of those opportunities and some experts in the field that, as we're beginning to think about the potential to relocate the city offices downtown and other kinds of development, there's going to be a parking component. The question is, how do you leverage that to create more private investment? Don't think of it as just a utilitarian part of the development efforts. So that's priority one, central business district. Right, this one kind of, I think, kind of bumped some pagination, but safety and awareness. Again, in this case, the city continues to play the role as champion. And I highlighted this last night. You know, when this came up as an issue, there's two parts to this. There's the perception of crime and lack of safety in the city, and then there's the reality, and those two things don't necessarily line up according to stats. Yes, there's some spikes in different types of crime, but overall, Lebanon is a very safe city from a statistical standpoint. So there's a perception that needs to be overcome. So how do you do that? How do you, one, address some of the realities, but then also concurrently make sure that the perception and the story is told? And you can do that by a couple different ways. And again, these are just three actions that are highlighted in the plan, and then there's sub-tactics underneath each of these, of course. Sometimes it's as simple as updating, right? Communicating on a regular basis, not just a one-time flyer in the newspaper or something like that, but regular updates on how's this plan going? You know, what's happening in your downtowns? What events are happening? Events programming that's for real and continues to be updated, because a lot of times, you know, to Rich's point, we see a big start and you end up listing what the events are and what the programming is, and then you kind of back away and it becomes dated. So you really have to make sure that that type of activity stays updated, and the Business Improvement District, once it's formed, can help with those kinds of efforts. Next area is in media communications. Building relationships with the local media outlets, newspapers, televisions, and such, to really say, you know, when we're reporting on events, make sure it's balanced, right? Make sure that when there are some real crime issues that may be happening, and we try to also, you know, highlight the positives. You know, make sure that there's, hello? Rich, you just continue. That was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah, the batteries are dead. All right. Hello. All right, I'll just try to get out. Building relationships with the media and the media communications is a definite area that we should undertake. And then finally, you know, thinking about this is the real presence, right? Okay, so make sure lighting, infrastructure, and those kinds of issues that really do create a sense that it's not safe or it's scary or whatever. You know, you really need to focus on those infrastructure issues. And engage the police force with foot patrols and other types of more highly visible presence in the downtown. Definitely provides a sense of safety and engagement, and also awareness and communication about what is actually happening in the downtown. So the plan highlights those areas and again details some of those tactics. Housing options, right? Okay. Housing, we cannot emphasize enough that housing is economic development. Housing is where your talent, your families, your investment, your businesses they all reside, right, in housing. And so, again, so often, housing is not part of an economic development strategy overall, and the developers do housing or somebody else does housing and you don't necessarily worry about it. It is, without diverse housing options at various price points to really allow for a continuum of a resident base to grow, it's going to be a challenge to attract investment. So thinking about what the housing stock looks like, what kind of options are there, where can new housing be inserted, is all a part of this. And in this case, the city does play the role as a catalyst, right? They can't actually do housing development, but they can attract developers, and that conversation is ongoing as well as a part of this study. So some of the specifics under this is we encourage the exploration of establishing a land bank. So where there is vacant property or blended property that could be included as part of an established land bank, there could be some advantages there. It doesn't necessarily say you should form a land bank, but it says go ahead and take a look at the pros and cons. We didn't have a lot of time during this study to actually detail a feasibility study for a land bank, but it's something we wanted to put on the table. Promoting infill opportunities. You'll see in some of the mapping process here that we did identify where are some of those infill opportunities, but begin thinking about where are there areas that we can insert new development for housing in the downtown. And then finally, coordinate and communicate with local realtors. A lot of times there could be biases over the years or just lack of information that the realtor community may be pushing buyers to a different location. They don't understand what the opportunities are, what could be happening going forward. So building communication with your local realtors is something that's is very critical and should be undertaken as part of the plan. Hello? Oh, it's coming back. Just like that. It didn't do a thing. Great. All right, so increased housing options. The next one is close the talent gap. And again, this is not necessarily a leading role or even a catalytic role for the city to play, because there's so many other players that are involved in workforce development and training. But it is part of this plan in terms of thinking where are the gaps, where are the challenges that our industry folks need, and identifying those and making sure that we're aware of those, and then convening folks around the table to discuss those types of activities. So one of the very discrete tactics that we saw as an important part of this was to host, and the city can host this, an educator and industry summit. A very specific conversation should take place about where are some of those gaps, where are some of those training opportunities, how quickly can new curriculum be filled, is it on the fly, is it on the job training, are there training dollars available to close some of those challenges, because there are some that are more immediate and there's some that are longer term. That requires a discussion at a little bit of a higher level, and so forming a summit like this on that topic is something that we think would be very important to do. Thinking about specialized training programs, because there are some very unique industry aspects here around food processing and agriculture, and within those there are skills that are very discrete and needed, and we heard that from some of the industry players. So there's a discussion in the plan about how to take on some of those specialized training opportunities and explore what they are. And then finally, again, just focusing on local needs. I mentioned food processing and agriculture. Then there's also a discussion about the bilingual support opportunities here. Take advantage of the fact that you have a growing culturally diverse population that speaks different languages. Is there an economic opportunity there through call centers and other types of opportunities that you can build upon that? And we think the answer is yes. Got to figure out exactly where it is, but it's definitely an opportunity. The next area is relative to small business development. And again, I hope you're seeing a theme here as we talk about these priorities and how they relate to the vision, those three pillars. Each one relates. In this case, the city can be, again, a convener. You really can't influence business to be created. You can't create a business yourself, but you can definitely set the policy environment. You can definitely pull the players together, and you can definitely make it easier for a business to get started. Identify where there are policy barriers or regulatory issues that may inhibit or challenge an entrepreneur from getting started. In this case, there's increasing interest in especially smaller towns in forming a formal entrepreneurial center, a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs. And one of the critical elements in all of this is having a college and a technical school available to leverage its resources and faculty talent to help make that happen. You'll see a couple examples in the plan itself, one of which is highlighted in the city of Altoona, which is my hometown. I know it very well. The Sheets Entrepreneurial Center is a partnership with Penn State Altoona that has both public and private dollars invested in it and a series of activities that have helped to advance it. We think something like that can happen here, and it can happen in the downtown. You've got all the ingredients to make it happen, so I think it's important. And then the other, the other aspect is funding, looking at special funding programs for neighborhood-based businesses, especially those that are unique to the new immigrants and culturally diverse residents that are moving in. Is there an opportunity to really create, and this is where we really want to think about the vision, to create some interesting business opportunities that may only be known about or thought about from folks that are coming from different countries or different cultures. Build upon that, and if there's some special funds that could be help to seed those businesses, we think that's an opportunity as well. Marketing and engagement, and this is really relevant to the city itself. How do you market? How do you market the central business district? How do you make sure that the city is welcoming and communicating its engagement channels the right way? City as champion. One of the big things we see, and this is a growing issue in a lot of cities, especially smaller towns, that are challenged from a budgetary standpoint, but we really feel it's important to have a dedicated point of contact for economic development. And sometimes that can be slash community development, slash economic development staff person, but as long as someone on the outside can definitely look into the city and say, here's where I go, this is the person who can help me. That's a critical part of the engagement and communication channels. Engaging diverse culture, I've talked about that. There's activities related to that. Forming a standing economic development restructuring committee to have an ongoing dialogue. We know that there is already in place an economic development restructuring committee that should become a standing organization. That should be evolved so there's the folks around the table can continue to serve to monitor this plan and communicate to the other stakeholders that are important as part of that. Then some of the more tactical things like updating the web communications. We know the website is being looked at and is going through an update, but making sure that there's bilingual opportunities there for folks to use the website. Really fundamental stuff to make sure everyone can engage on it. And explore a neighborhood branding idea. So this would be looking at different pockets of neighborhoods that may have a different flavor to them. And a branding effort can really help out, and it can help engage folks in different neighborhoods as part of this process, and it can help form an identity for some of these neighborhoods that may have some historical ties and may have some new emerging opportunities. So that's another way to market and engage. Now move quickly through these last two. Although this is really critically important, I mentioned economic development seen through the eyes of tourism is something that you really have here. Cyclists are already coming through. There's lots of activities that are underway. There's investment that can be needed, that can be supporting this type of activity. It's happening across cities across the country. But there's also in place a lot of partners that can help support this. So one of the action items underneath this is really looking at public-private partnerships or P3s. Identifying who's all involved in this and how can they be engaged to improve the infrastructure, lane sharing, signage, wayfinding, all of those types of things. look at your partners to where there could be resources so it's not just a burden on the city, and there's lots of different funding opportunities out there to do that. And then exploring dedicated staffing, and again, this is an idea where it could be done through volunteers, or it could be a county level person that we're seeing more and more that there's a dedicated role in the transportation infrastructure area for an active transportation planner, focused only on this type of thing. How does active transportation interact with transit in your downtown? It's a very specialized thing, but I think it's something that the city could actually build upon and see the benefits. Finally, the eighth priority is to focus on targeted investment areas. And this was part of the challenge that Sherry gave us when we started. And she said, can you really think about where are the areas, or how can we define areas for future investment within the city? And so we did that. And we really, in the plan itself, again, there's a map, there's very targeted areas that have been identified in the plan itself. But we wanted to sit back and say, let's think about classifications. Let's really look at all of this through the lens of categories. And so we came up with 5 classifications for targeted investment zones. One we're calling new development, or green space. We're really fortunate to have already defined some very discrete keystone opportunity zones within the city. And a lot of that is just green space. Ready to go, shovel-ready sites that have some incentives behind them. That's the new development areas, and that's a targeted investment zone. And there's some good activity that Sherry's going to highlight here happening in some of those areas right now. The catalytic zones, that's your central business district. For every investment that can occur in your central business district, it creates a benefit to other areas, either by bringing folks in, creating new economic spin-outs, and other developments can occur. So there's a real catalytic effect for any development that occurs in your central business district. The third is active development zones. These are the corridors. So we took some time to really map out where are the transit routes, where are the trail systems, where are the trail heads, where does it lead to? And begin to draw that out. That can be a foundation for an active transportation planning idea, or a committee that could be formed to really work upon that. Active transportation. Infill opportunities. This is where the land banking and other kinds of opportunities can come about to identify where are those infill opportunities that can be reinvented, secured in some way, and developed either in the short term or the long term. And finally, adaptive development opportunities. These are really existing buildings that can be turned into something else. So where are those? We know that there's some ideas and a need for a hotel potentially, and I know that's something that's going to be a longer term discussion going from this plan. But take a look at across the city, and we mapped out a few of where those adaptive opportunities are, and take advantage of those and think creatively about what they can become. And real quickly then, the last part is tracking all this, right? So it's important not only to track it, but then to communicate on a regular basis, how's it going? Where are we from A to Z in that continuum over the next 5 years? And again, this is one of these areas where the ongoing support and the actions of a committee and the engagement of all folks across the board, it really becomes important, because if you let it slide, if it becomes something of a burden, it really is a challenge to keep the plan active. So all of the activities we really define lead to the reporting out and the tracking of the progress and making sure that's communicated. And so what we did was we highlighted a few dashboard elements, data points that go into this. Some are unique to Lebanon City, and some, again, we pulled from the national best practices, both in leading and lagging indicators, to help you inform the plan and report out on its impact going forward. So that's the highlight of the structure of the plan. There's so much more involved in the details of the document itself, which will be posted again. Thank you for bearing with me and the technical difficulties in my nose. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sherry, and she'll highlight some of the project activities that are occurring within the city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Well, I would like to take a few minutes to highlight some of the key projects that are happening in the city or will happen. Steve had talked about some investment